Almost $30 million in best ball tournaments have already launched for 2023 fantasy football. So what better time to kick off a brand new show, partnership between Legendary Upside, winner of Ball Mania 3, Pat Kerrane's latest venture, and Spike Week, spikeweek.com. This is for the real sickos, the legendary sickos. And episode 1 today, myself, Erik Beimfohr, and Pat Kerrane are going to get into how you can tackle, how you can get an edge in these crazy, huge best ball tournaments that we now have. Get your share of $30 million. We're going to figure that out for you today. We were talking before the show, and I love a good intro, but we got to get a blend of a rocket with I don't know what's going to be like the bit of the legend, right? We built this whole rocket and sicko theme. What's the, because it's like technically Legendary Upside is referring to running backs, but you can't make that you can't make that.
No, we can't. Well, leg up is the shorthand, so maybe could we just maybe some line dancers, some kick.
Yeah, right. Right, exactly.
But, I'm pretty jealous of your the spike. I mean, the rocket launch graphic and everything. I just launch. I just hit record and start talking.
We got big plans. Those are one of the things I was just talking to. For anyone that is watching Spike Week for the first time, one of my coworkers, Rob Coakley at King Coakley on Twitter, he does a lot of awesome media stuff for us. He put together that intro actually, but I was just talking to him the other day. The intros and like outros and like skins on your streams and stuff are these things that like don't really matter. Like they really, but to me, it's one of those things where like it just absolutely irks me about little itty bitty things about like, I got to have the intro. I got to have this, that. And so there's actually some big changes I want to make to that. The whole motivation, little peek behind the curtain, the whole motivation, I was like trying to get a designer to do like the Pixar intro. I was like, how do we recreate the Pixar intro, but like with rockets and have it kind of best ball themed or fantasy football themed or whatever. And, shout out to the design folks and stuff. There's a little bit of a knowledge gap between fantasy football and, your typical tech designers or whatever, but that's the goal. So maybe we can experiment with Legendary Upside. We'll figure out a special fun little intro there.
Yeah, anything is an improvement on not having an intro, which is currently Legendary Upside podcast does not have an intro other than some free music that I have.
Hey, yeah, everybody starts somewhere. God, I don't even want to go look back at the original Spike Week videos and stuff. So I can attest to that part of it. But everybody, thank you for watching. Obviously, we're pre-recording this, but thank you for watching the first episode of this Legendary Sicko show. 2 quick housekeeping things before we get into the stuff you guys really want to hear today. 1, this will be a weekly show. We're going to try to pre-record it and get it out to you guys about every Thursday. I'm not a huge stickler on the exact scheduling, but we'll try to get it out to you sometime late afternoon on Thursdays, most weeks, obviously schedule dependent. And then the big thing with this partnership, the thing I'm most excited for, we have obviously launched at Spike Week, our premium best ball tools, premium subscription. You get access to some things that Pat's also doing in terms of rankings and right strategy, content, and all of that. But the big thing that we do is, best ball tools, our biggest tool being what we call Draft IQ, where if you've drafted any form of best ball team ever, tracking your exposures and your teams, and even in season, seeing how they're doing, particularly on somewhere like Draftkings, where it's literally impossible to even see how much of a player you have. We built tools to help you do that. And they're built by total sicko best ball players. So you can dive into absolutely anything you want to see about your best ball teams. And we continue to grow that tool suite that we're offering. We have projected ownership now. We're building out a bunch of more cool tools. And normally, you can get that for $40 a month or $300 for the entire NFL season, which does run through the whole season, playoffs, Super Bowl, everything. Because, of course, NFL playoff best ball, there's in-season tournaments. We cover all of that. So you get all that with your subscription. However, with this Legendary Upside partnership, anyone who is subscribed to Legendary Upside and also subscribes to Spike Week using promo code LEGUP will get 40% off either of those subscriptions. For as long, if you stay subscribed to Pat forever, you will get 40% off of your Spike Week subscription forever. So hopefully that's a nice little perk for the Legendary Upside folks to be able to really, I know they're going to be sinking their teeth into best ball. I mean, Jesus, Pat won Best Ball Mania 3. So naturally they're going to be following for his advice, but hopefully we can offer those folks, those subscribers, just a little bit extra with some tools that can also take their game to the next level.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, from my perspective, it's pretty amazing because you're, I'm offering a $30 off the first year. So it takes the price down to $69. And then, you can get like a year of Spike Week. Your savings is like $120, just like a penny under. I mean, it's
pretty sick.
Pretty good. It's pretty good deal.
On top of, I'm happy to tout Pat was giving away $50 of underdog credit for his subscriber, which I think is a little bit of a limited time only, but
there's just limited credits. And Erik, I might not be good at business because I may have gone too far here. The credits are flying off the shelves. I don't think this promo code is going to help that. So I would say if you have subscribed to Legendary Upside and you've not gone to the site, at the top of the site is it says perks/Discord. Click that. There's a form. You got to fill out that form. I got to send your username to Underdog. I can't give you credit if you don't give me your username. Yeah. And I'm basically doing it based on who sends me their username. That's what's going to dictate who gets the credits. Now, the credits aren't like imminently about to be gone, but it's going to happen a lot faster than I thought. Yes. So maybe, don't like forget it, but don't let it slip your mind.
But very excited for this. Obviously, I love Pat's content. We've been doing some content for the last multiple years now. I mean, I remember anybody that, if you're new, I'm sure you know Pat from Ship Chasing, obviously Legendary Upside, Roto World, whatever. I feel like this is such a good partnership, not only because it makes so much sense for the Legendary Upside folks to use the Spike Week tools and just the general crossover, but before Best Ball even really became what it is right now, right? Best Ball Mania 2, the summer before Best Ball Mania 2 was when Spike Week started. You were, I think, at Roto World at that point, or almost to Roto World. But you're doing Ship Chasing, and we had a couple different streams on Ship Chasing. Myself, you, Ben, Gretchen, Peter Overzet, that kind of broke Best Ball.
Or fixed it, depending on your point of view.
Yeah, exactly. If you loved running backs back then, even if you loved running backs, I don't know if it broke it or fixed it because you were getting, the drafts.
It made it harder to win by drafting a lot of running backs, I think.
But the whole landscape has shifted, and I think it's a good segue into this year, 2023. Now we have 4 different tournaments, 3 different sites, totaling almost just shy of $30 million in total prizes, $15 million on Underdog, and just a little bit less than $13 million on Draftkings, and then a $2 million tournament on Drafters as well. So players have, dude, if you want to play this hybrid tournament that Underdog has offered, you got it, and a bunch of money. You want to play the typical old school playoff format, DraftKings, right? PPR, bonuses, all that kind of stuff. They have small field tournaments, they have large field tournaments, and then you got Drafters, which is like, dude, if you just want, I'm going to draft the best team, and I'm going to win $300,000. You have that too, and so 2 years ago, this whole game was so much different. Obviously, it was smaller, but the game was different too. And I'm finding myself thinking about how to draft teams like immediately right now differently than I did back then. So I was curious how you're approaching just kind of the general landscape before we dive into like players and some draft strategies and stuff. How are you thinking about the fact that like we have all this on our, we're at a buffet, we're at a best ball buffet right now.
A buffet is, an interesting way to think about it, because I'm kind of like, I'm looking at my Best Ball Mania tickets, and like it's not like my main meal necessarily, but it's something I would really care to savor and enjoy. And so I'm not gonna order that right away. First, I've dabbled, I've drafted in Best Ball Mania, but I think I only have 4 teams drafted in Best Ball Mania, because as soon as I got the Draftkings opportunity, I did that. I was drafting. I think I've already drafted 4 or 5 of those, even though it's been out for way less time, because I don't want to spend too much of my Best Ball Mania entries in this early part of the season. I think if you're trying to get ADP values, which is the big reason to draft early, then the best time to do that was right after the draft, right after Best Ball Mania launched. And that's when I drafted a couple. I drafted, I think, another one Saturday, but I don't think I've drafted. I think maybe Monday was the last one that I did. And then I was working on my Best Ball rankings and stuff. So I was like genuinely busy. But as soon as I made time once DraftKings launched, because like I don't just like time wise, I'm not going to be able to in, let's say, July and August draft all the drafts I want to draft. So if I want to play as much best ball as I want, I am going to have to do some now. I'm thinking, what's a tournament that maybe I would be happy that I spent more of my bullets in May? Even if May is ultimately going to probably be a little bit less of a plus EV time to draft because it's going to be so chaotic. Well, to me, it's the $10 DraftKings tournament. That's the one where I'm like,
yep,
what if I just land on something outrageous? And it's a 1,400 final week 17 field roughly, right? And so I need to hit the nuts, and I need to hit the nuts in a particular week. Like I need to have, it's very unlikely for me to do this. So maybe that's the one that I want to take to the earliest period where stuff is the least settled. And it's DraftKings where if you're trying to get ADP values, then you stack that on DraftKings, which is the site where you get ADP values. I could land on something, like I said, just completely absurd.
And you have 2 extra picks for anyone that has not played DraftKings best ball on DraftKings. And that sounds like nothing, but I think once you draft a few times, you'll realize there's a pretty stark difference actually between having those 2 extra picks in multiple different facets. But also for drafting now, you never really relieve the pressure of the risk of the early part of the offseason, but having 2 extra bullets, particularly if you're a smart drafter, right? You're gonna miss in September and late August. You're gonna miss. But now we understand the uncertainty levels, right? Like we don't even know, like there's all that, we'll get into some of this, but like the backup running backs are clear as mud, in terms of who to even draft in most of these backfields. But having the extra picks right now allows you to feel a little bit more comfortable about not giving up too much expected value at this part of the offseason, which, man, on Underdog, same as you, I drafted 1 Best Ball Mania team because I'm employing pretty much a similar strategy to you. I'm going to dive into the DraftKings Millie first because I'm going to try to basically unlock a super team for that week 17 final. Like I want to build a team that when I get to week 17 and I compare that team with some DFS projections, right? I say, holy shit, look at all these, like these guys all project awesome, right?
Yeah.
I have, and that could be contingent value running backs. It could just be landing on the right game stack. It could be contingent value wide receivers, tight ends, right? It could be anything, but I'm just trying to use the chaos of the offseason to my advantage in this, like you said, 1,400 person final. Even Best Ball Mania at 430 or whatever it is person final, combine that with very sharp drafters, much sharper drafters on Underdog. I think 18 spots, so I get 2 less, right? I can be wrong less on Underdog. Every wasted spot is so much more important on Underdog. And then, as you said, you also just have this like human element, this time element. Like I am only one human. A draft takes 45 minutes. Like, and even if you're like slow drafting, there's only so many you can have on the clock before it just drains your whole day. I'm just trying to think about how to tackle it, and I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm a barbell drafter proponent because I do believe in trying to unlock some super teams if possible. But now that was like when I very first wrote the very first like barbell draft approach that I was 2 years ago. There was like 1 best ball tournament. It was Best Ball Mania 2. So it was like none of this other stuff mattered. Contest selection didn't matter, right? My human time didn't matter. Now all that stuff matters. Now all that stuff matters. So I'm just taking into account and focusing, being smart about how I focus my time.
Yeah, I'm actually not a barbell drafter because it's the human time element is like, I just want to make sure I'm, drafting these teams and enjoying it. Like if you're you're firing at a DK Millie, which is a lotto, the Best Ball Mania is basically a lotto. You know, there will be some smaller field tournaments that you know, it's easier to advance teams to the finals. I imagine DK will offer some of that. They did last year. Underdog has offered tournaments like that where you're much more likely to get through to the finals.
Yep.
And so those are a little bit less lottos, but just in general, when you're mostly firing at these super top heavy tournaments that have these playoff final structures, you're probably not going to have a profitable season. You know, the bet is I'm not going to have a profitable season most of the time, but when I have a profitable season, it's going to be very profitable. That's your bet. And you have to understand that the chances of you ever hitting that are not great, but that's sort of the game we're playing. These are GPPs. So for me, it's important that I'm enjoying the ride. You know, it's like, what's the point of this? If I'm not having fun, like I could be putting my money in like probably better places, you know? So even though I think I have an edge, like I think enjoying this is important and spacing it out to some degree is important. But the fact that we have so many different tournaments that we can fire at, I think, you know, to me, I'm like, well, I'm just going to draft Best Ball Mania. I'm going to drip Best Ball Mania through the entire off season and not worry about barbelling that. But I'm going to wait until the schedule comes out to really start firing. Mm-hmm. And I think the correlation element is probably more important even in Best Ball Mania than compared to this DraftKings 1,400 person final tournament. Because if you think about it, if this was a DFS tournament and it was a 450 person field versus 1,400, and you know, I don't know how familiar the listeners are with that, you know, kind of small field, medium field type of DFS strategy, but those are basically different types of tournaments. Like, correct. One is a bigger small field tournament. It's on the big side of small field, but one is above anything that you would call like true small field. You'd be playing it a little bit different. And what you'd probably be doing is maybe you're not quite as tightly correlated in some ways. And you're understanding the fact that there's going to be more teams. Someone's probably going to land on, you know, just the right combination of dudes, you know, to some extent. Now I think you want to have some stacking, but having that bring back is probably a little less important in the 1,400 field than it is in the 450, because, you know, it's not just about getting a couple things right. Like my underdog winning lineup wasn't like that great, you know, like it didn't, it got a couple things right. It's not winning in a 1,400 person field. That team wouldn't have won. So I think you want to think through that. And then also the 20 roster spots versus 18, that's 2 extra players on every single roster that can get there for someone else, potentially in an uncorrelated way. So I think if you are going to fire at something before we have the NFL schedule, we're obviously not going to have that kind of correlation, that bring back correlation. You can mix in a little bit of divisional opponents, hope you get some of that just naturally, but we don't know. You know, it's just guesswork. You can build stacks though, and I definitely recommend doing that. But, you know, if I don't have that bring back lever, then I think I want to at least go to the bigger field where it probably matters a little less.
Yep. And I couldn't possibly agree more. Where I made kind of my hay in all of this whole space fantasy sports was in DFS and was specifically in small field tournaments. And I'm talking 1,400 was big to me. I didn't even like look at if it had more than 1,000 people or something, I like wasn't even interested. Like 400 would be like they would have it used to be, DraftKings changes their names all the time. Something like they would call it the game changer, which is like a higher stakes tournament, you know, depending on the week, 200 to 500 teams. And it was like, that's where I would live, because like you said, and I think that's what ended up turning into this, like me just having the light bulb about the playoffs and week 17 correlation and playoff correlation and all that kind of stuff, was because that's where I came from, right? Like you said, if you play in these lottos in DFS, and again, 1,400 is not a lotto, but let's just use that as an easy parallel. Yeah, you're stacking, and yeah, you're going to have bringbacks, you know, on some teams and stuff. But like, I would never make a team without like a game stack, basically, in that 200 to 500 person tournament, because like you said, I just had to get basically that right, and like a running back, or you know, maybe the running back was involved in the game. I just had to get like 2 things right, really, you know, and then pray for your defense. You know, that's all it really was like hit the game that goes nuts. maybe get one other thing right, and you're done. Like that's it.
Yeah.
And so
yeah,
that's so different than the 1400 thing where, like you said, and with 20 guys, it's even different. It's even harder than DFS because all your opponents have all these backup chips, right? In DFS, it's like, even if other guys nail that correct game and some correct things, you still have to use every score. In this, it's like you whiff on, like you did in week 17 specifically, didn't even hit on your first couple picks in terms of their contribution to your starting lineup.
Well, Eckler was my first pick.
But Saquon, right?
Saquon did not contribute to my week 17 lineup.
Think about DFS. If your second most expensive player in DFS in a tournament was a total bust, like you're probably screwed, right? Unless your $3,000 1% owned guy goes for 30, like it's really hard to win. And so I'm just trying to think about all of those variables. And I think that's sometimes what gets lost is exactly what you outlined in terms of just how different the games are.
Yeah. I mean, I had Mostert slot into my lineup, who was, I think, my 15th round pick or something. And, but if you get, but like that, there's always a couple guys who are going to have those types of games. And yeah, just a couple extra shots, not just on your team, but on every other team in the field, know, and it's such a bigger field. So it just magnifies the effect that we're already outlining there.
And then like Mike Leone from Establish the Run in his Best Ball Manifesto talked a little bit about, and you've hit on it ever since, about like just having live players, right? And so again, with the extra 2 spots, you obviously have a shot at more live players, but everybody, 1,400 other teams have a shot at those live players as well. The hell is calling me? I hate when that happens. It takes over my headphones and I can't think for those God. 2 seconds.
Are you gonna edit this, or it was this all in?
We'll leave it in. It'll be fine. Let me see. Make sure I got. Okay, we're good. And these people, in the live streams, chaos happens. So whatever, we'll figure it out. But having those you need to have those live players even more in this DraftKings Millie, and everyone else is gonna there are gonna be teams like that have like almost their full roster live, that have a bunch of guys who are like actually good plays, right? That like are fringe startable in a managed league. They're going to have a ton of guys. And so that's why I do think, to your original point, drafting now in that one and hoping to kind of just get lucky, right? You hit the late round running backs that are actually the right contingent value guys. And it's a total crapshoot. Or you could do the opposite. Take your early running backs and you hit like a bunch of these rookie wide receivers or late round wide receivers or late round tight end or whatever. I just think it's the right tournament to be drafting now if we're choosing one.
Yeah. And I think to the kind of the small field thing, I do think it's just so important to think about all of these tournaments as like you think about the final week first. And I still feel this way about Underdog. I know there's been a lot of debate about, how we play this now with the new structure and everything. I still feel like you play for the big money up top in week 17. That's your primary strategy. And, thinking about it as a 1 week tournament first, not we advance, then we advance, then we advance, then we get there, hope we win. It's build the lineup that can actually build the lineup that you would want in a 500 person field or 450 person field. And that's generally a lineup that only needs to have a couple things go right, because when you get those couple things, you vault to the top, right? It's that the couple things are not just this one guy and this one guy. It's you're saying I get this one thing right, and that's 3 spots on my lineup. I get another thing right. That was another 3 spots on my lineup. You're getting that one thing, and it's creating this cascading effect of wins that's putting you way, way higher on the leaderboard. Yeah. And one of those things is going to need to be like absolutely massive and very unlikely to happen. But, these are huge tournaments that we're playing in. So that's the way this goes. But yeah, I think with the DraftKings lineup, when you get there with the 1,400 team tournament, I'd be a little bit more comfortable building something the day of week 17 in a 1,400 team field that wasn't as pretty, that had, look, this guy's a value saver. I'm just going to put him in. He's not correlated with anything. I just like him. I think he's going to get a lot of targets this week. You would do more of that. And the nature of drafting right now is you're going to end up with teams like that.
Absolutely. It's more of, there are a few guys who, right, DraftKings came out, again, using the DFS parallels. DraftKings comes out with pricing every Sunday night, and we find out on Monday XYZ are hurt. And so you have these salary savers that are great point per dollar plays. They're not correlated to anything in your optimal team, the team that you want to build, but it's like they're gonna let me get Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, whatever, as opposed to, of course, I'm not saying those are bad on underdog. They're still very good on underdog. But in terms of the construction, you would start more on the, I need this game, or I need these couple things, as opposed to that
right now.
Yeah, which we just absolutely cannot do. How are you in terms of BBM? I'm glad you brought up BBM. You know, you mentioned talking about still starting kind of at week 17, but is there anything else you're like thinking about with this structure? Because for anyone not aware, it is a huge change. So really what we have is 2 tournaments in one, a $15 million prize pool, but 10 goes to, we basically have last year's Best Ball Mania within this $15 or $15 million tournament, but they also took $5 million and made it into a regular season tournament. But it's extremely top heavy. So we have those 2 tournaments, and the way that the structure ended up being is only the top 1.5% of regular season teams are getting paid out, and from 1,000th place to 10,000th place basically is $250. So you make, you 10x your $25, which is great. But then that's fine. But then really the top 1,000 in the regular season is where you start to get some regular season money. That's like a tiny percentage. And then because of that, and because we moved the top prize on the playoff side from 2 million to 3 million, but we did not increase the total prize pool, it's still 10 million. That kind of, you make less money again by advancing. You just get your money back. Like congratulations, you just pulled off a tough feat and you advanced and you have a really good team. All you did was get your money back. So like, how are you thinking about, obviously, the week 17 thing, but is there anything else that you're trying to think through in building your teams?
Well, I guess I'm a little bit not on board with like the general take. It seems to be, I don't know if it's a general take, but a popular take is like, basically this is now sort of a different tournament. We should be chasing the regular season a little bit more. And I don't agree with that. I think, there's more money in the regular season, but the top prize decreased. Right? There's more prizes, but the top prize is not $1 million anymore. It's $500,000. Mm-hmm. So you're going to chase $500,000 instead of 3 million, or 1 million in second place. I mean, I think you still want to go where the biggest pot of money is, which is in week 17, and and the biggest prizes, the biggest individual prizes are also in week 17. And to me, what this has done is it's like, you better finish first in that week 17 tournament and not third. You gotta finish first. So, it's going to be tough to like necessarily do a ton of tweak. There's not much we can do to say, oh, I built this team to finish first, not fifth. You know what I mean? But I do think you want to build a team that is making bets on week 17 outcomes. I feel very strongly about that. In fact, you could argue that it's more important this year than last year because of how,
I think so too.
Because of how top heavy the prize pool is, that you need to be at the very top.
There is an awesome user, and I believe he's also in the Leg Up Discord. He's in the Spike Week Discord. Probably going to be a lot of crossover. Sacrilegious is his Discord name. He is a this is why I love like these Discords and stuff like this. I mentioned this on Rob and I show 2 days ago. I was like, I started this as like, oh, I'm really into best ball. I think it's going to be big. Let's build a brand or whatever. And now it's like, I love doing the content. I love doing everything. I like just having the Discord and listening to these other smart people like tell me like what the real answers are. Like you're watching me do a show, and a lot of the stuff I'm learning is from these other smart people that aren't actually producing content. He is one.
I had someone in. Sorry to derail, but
you're fine.
It's just so funny because this happened this morning. Someone in my Discord was asking me about the sims that I was doing, and I was like explaining like, oh, here's what I do, He's like, oh, so essentially you're creating an archetype and then you're using that. He like explained to me, and I was like, that's what I do. I'm so I'm smart. He like told me what I was doing. I was like, that was a million times better than I could have explained what I'm attempting to do.
And that's exactly what I was going to say with this particular individual. I've been trying to describe this Best Ball Mania structure in terms of what it means to drafters. And I wrote a whole really long article that literally every single like portion of the payout structure I tried to identify as to what it means, and got down to the end and was basically just like what you said, that like this is so top all what we really did was turn this into a top heavier tournament, both on both sides, like you said. And so what does that mean, right? I never put it this way, but Sacrilegious was like, all they did was like skyrocket up the variance of this tournament. Right? It's obviously top heavy, but people are just like, oh, top heavy, whatever. No, like the variance now is absurd, because like you said, you could have an unreal team, whether that's regular season or playoffs, and like tiny little bit of variance, and you go from maybe the favorite in week 17, maybe the favorite for the regular season, to like 10th. And like, that's, I mean, no one's scoffing at the 10th place prizes. It's like 10K or something like that. But like 3 million versus 10K is like 10K is not life changing. Yeah. 3 million is life changing for anyone. And so the variance level of this speaks to exactly what you said, that like, I have to build for that variance. And I think people are doing the opposite, because we see regular season. Like, oh, look, there's regular season prizes. That means I can just build the bet, air quotes, right? The bet, I can build a cash team in DFS and put that into tournaments. I actually think what this has done is the opposite. You need to build for higher variance outcomes that may be even less likely than before. It's not just get your ADP value and stack week 17, right? It's not, I'm not saying I have all the right applications, because I don't. It's the beginning of May. But I think that we really need to understand how high variance this is. It's not less variance. It's actually quite a bit more.
Yeah. And I also want to make the point that it's now harder to advance to the finals than it was last year. So, right, there's more people in the overall tournament, but the finals field is smaller. Okay. That means it's harder to get there. So it's not, it's not the most complicated math. It's coming from a guy who's given away a lot, like way too much in promo stuff. So, my math skills are obviously not the best. But look, if you're trying to get to week 17, you need to win 2 single week tournaments in week 15 and 16 after advancing. I think focusing on building a team that advances, obviously you have to do that, but you also want to have a team that has a good chance of getting there. And that can mean adding some bringbacks in week 16 if that makes sense. But you're potentially giving up some week 17 correlation there, so you don't necessarily want to prioritize that. One thing that I've been thinking about, and I wrote a bit about this on Legendary Upside in an article where I basically dared the field to snipe my quarterbacks, because Leone's article pointed out that 2 quarterback teams, when game stacked, meaning you have stacked with pass catchers or quarterbacks and you have a bring back, that those constructions were actually higher EV than 3 quarterback teams that did the same thing. So we talk about correlation, week 17, how important it is, getting the bring back, all of that. You would think that having a third out to that type of game hitting would be even better, but it wasn't. And one of the reasons that I think this is the case is that elite quarterback has been very powerful in best ball. You can't really replace when Jalen Hurts goes off for one of his. That's not like something you can find later. Not really. I mean, it can happen. Some of these later quarterbacks can pop up for spike weeks, but the spike weeks are mostly coming from these elite quarterbacks. You also have the fact that if you're tacking on a third quarterback, that quarterback is not usually likely to add a spike week, particularly if you're doing it like late in the draft. You're adding like a Mac Jones or a Kenny Pickett or a CJ Stroud. The odds that these guys are going to go off for some ridiculous quarterback score in week 17 or even in week 15 or 16 are not particularly high. They're very low, I would say. So that would then lead you to think, all right, well, then I want to save that bullet. That's a bullet that I can use on a skill position player who might have a spike week that gets me through the finals or gets me through to the finals or goes off in the finals and wins me the money. So you want to save that bullet. So we're prioritizing 2 quarterback builds over 3 quarterback builds. I'm going to mix in 3 quarterback builds. But it's a backup plan. It's my backup plan. I think it's a viable backup plan, but a backup plan. But why do we have to stop at 2 stacks? Why do we have to stop at 2 stacks with 2 quarterbacks?
Yes.
We don't have to stop at 2 stacks. And that's where I'm saying, like, oh God, I took Jamar Chase and now I can't do Burrow. That's not the best example, but what if you took Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and you don't get Tua?
You're fine.
That hurts. That hurts, right? It does hurt. But if you can then get, if you are able to get in an additional 2 stacks, you still take 2 quarterbacks who are stacked and have bringbacks. I want to bring back on that Miami stack.
Yep.
That's not 100%. A dead stack. That's a Miami. There's 3 games that went off, and I have all 3 in my week 17 lineup. That's how you finish at the very top, I think.
Bingo. Now I'm just like, this is the reminiscing podcast, episode 1, where I think back to, again, two years ago, one of the first videos I actually did. And again, all this comes from my just disturbed DFS brain, where we would call that a secondary stack or a secondary correlation, right? And you will also do this,
mini correlation,
or mini, right? Something along those lines. And you would do this in DFS too. So you build your game. You can only play 1 quarterback, right? Say on draft, you're playing NFL week 2 DFS tournaments on Draftkings. You can only play 1 quarterback, right? But that doesn't mean you stack that game, right? I'm playing Tom Brady. I will use the week 17. I'm playing Tom Brady to Mike Evans with DJ Moore. Congratulations, you hit the stone cold nuts. That doesn't mean that if Raheem Mostert is your RB2, that when you get to that flex spot or that wide receiver 3 or whatever on your team, that you just always pick the best. If you have 2 3K wide receivers and Tyquan Thornton is correlated to Raheem Mostert, you play Tyquan Thornton over the other 3K wide receiver, because again, it brings that game stack into play. If Raheem Mostert breaks off 2 long touchdowns in the first half, guess what the Patriots got to do? Throw it more. Guess who that benefits? Tyquan Thornton. So he gets a boost because of that game script and how everything is going. And that goes back to everything you said at the beginning. That's one less thing I had to get right. I got 1 thing right. I filled 2 roster spots. So yes, I didn't have the quarterback, but it didn't matter, because now I'm playing this game. I hit the Bucs game. Boom. Got 1 thing right. Filled 3 or 4 roster spots. And then I got 1 more game right. Boom. 2 more roster spots. There's 6 of 8. I don't really got to do anything else. You know what I mean? And so one of the first things I did from that DFS lens was stacking without the quarterback. You nailed it. It's like, do I want to miss on Tua when I get Tyreek and Waddle? No, of course not. No one's saying to go out of your way to do this, but it doesn't mean you can't still build a absolutely live team and a really good team just because you don't panic and be like, well, here it goes. Now I'm just going to let's throw this one in the garbage, because you can still make a really good team.
Someone just helped you potentially, because you need to finish first in a 450 team field. So that, you're going to need a few different things to go right. And so, let's say you had the Chase team and Burrow goes 1 pick before you. You're about to get him stacked up. You're all pissed, and I get it. But don't stop with Chase. Go get Boyd. The Burrow guy needs Boyd.
Yeah.
He's dead if he doesn't get Boyd, because let's say Burrow, week 17, Burrow goes off for a huge game. There's going to be other quarterbacks who score points, and quarterback doesn't separate from the other quarterbacks like skill position players do. And we don't have to fill as many. It's 1 quarterback spot that we have to fill. You get that big spike week out of a Bengals pass catcher because they went off. You get Tyler Boyd scored a couple touchdowns in week 17 or whatever. That matters a ton for your lineup. And you also had Chase, who's going off too, because the Bengals are chucking all over the field or whatever. So you're the one who's actually got the upside there. The uncorrelated Burrow guy is, he's not finishing last. He's not finishing last, but that's not how you finish first, and you need to finish first. So I think there's potential for you to double down when that type of thing happens. You're like, okay, fine. You think you've boxed me out. You've boxed out yourself. I'm going to continue tacking on. Not only am I going to get Chase and Boyd, I'm going to add Irv Smith, and then I'm going to get a bring back on this too, because this game's going to go off. It doesn't matter I don't have the quarterback, because I grabbed Anthony Richardson later. I grabbed, the second quarterback that you're able to stack up. You still want to be stacking up your guys. but that quarterback piece is the most replaceable. Getting a game that goes off right is, not replaceable. Like you still want to be building out those games.
Well, it's exactly like you said, and you just think about it logically. You only have to play one quarterback, and so let's just look at last year as one example. You had Tom Brady. You actually had both of these guys, so it really didn't matter. You locked the whole field out. But
Brady going off to that level actually kind of ended up hurting me, I think, a little bit. Like I was like, oh, stop.
And so Tom Brady, week 17, is the QB1, the highest scoring quarterback. Which what a hilarious run out last season was, by the way. I mean, Tom Brady just dunking on everybody in week 17, and Mike Evans dunking on everybody in week 17. But Brady scores 37 points, and Daniel Jones scores 36. Right? It's like, guess what? You got either of those two. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Now, the QB3 was Jarrett Stidham, so that doesn't really matter. But let's say some crazy person drafted Jarrett Stidham, or even Patrick Mahomes, 26 points. Russell Wilson, 25 points. It's like, yeah, okay, they didn't get you quite enough, but like if you had all the nuts around Patrick Mahomes or Russell Wilson, you could still win. You could still win that tournament, being down 11 or 12 points. The year before, when Liam won, he actually did not have the highest scoring quarterback. And the highest scoring quarterback was correlated with the guy who did break the slate. Jamar Chase in week 17, 2 years ago, put up 50 something. Him and Mike Evans did the same thing, put up 1 million, scored 4 touchdowns, went absolutely bonkers, had to have him. No questions. Joe Burrow scored 35 fantasy points. Go ahead.
Sorry, but keep in mind, I did not have Mike Evans on my team,
but like almost nobody did, right? Maybe 1 or 2 people in the whole final, I think, on BBM.
And this is why a 450 team field, and that was 470. That's one of the reasons, is that less Mike Evans teams made it. But like again, you want to play because you didn't even have to have the wide receiver, and I think you would have if he wasn't a second, third round pick.
Yeah,
but he went in the second round in the draft. He went before my pick in the second round. I was out of the 107, so he went before the 206 in my draft. So he was pretty expensive, but he was, he went off, and in a bigger field, he is going to be in the winning lineup. He just is. So
he was in the DraftKings Millie Maker.
Yeah.
All the top teams had Mike Evans, even though he was like 2% in the DraftKings Millie Maker final, but there was 1,000 teams. And guess what? 1,000 teams that have Tom Brady, Mike Evans stacks, and some of them have DJ Moore. Like you're just gonna need that guy. So it's a great point about the different field sizes. But then you look back 2 years ago at Liam's team. Joe Burrow goes for 35 fantasy points. Josh Allen was actually the QB4 with 24. So he lost 11 points at quarterback too. And that's the crazy thing. Burrow was the quarterback for
that is crazy actually.
And Liam did not need him to win. So think about that again, a smaller field, etc. But it's just like hammering home all these different things kind of all coming together in one. The size of the final, the structure of the tournament, right? It'll all in BBM also think about this year how much harder it'll be to get Mike Evans through. So if it's a 1% guy, that gets through, like I don't know that Mike Evans would have made it last year to the there wouldn't have been any teams. I think there was a couple, if I recall.
Yeah, it certainly would have been harder to get him through. Yeah.
So anyway, all this is like kind of coming together for me, and it's super fascinating because it is this convergence of the tournament structure, the final round, the way you construct your teams, and like. I just think that it all boils back down to what you said, obviously about stack. We of course want to stack our quarterbacks. We of course want to stack the games, but like there's other levers we can pull to give ourselves a shot, especially when you factor in the size of the final to like still win this thing, even if you don't have literally like the optimal for that week.
Yeah. Cause it's not big enough, 1,400, what's the Millie Maker that's like, is that like 500,000 people in that, or how many people are in that thing?
Oh my God, I don't actually remember. Though. I'll look it up while you.
Whatever it is, it's way more than 1,500 or 1,400. So you gotta, maybe it's not quite. I don't play the Millie Maker, so maybe I just completely off with that number. But I mean, there's kind of true small field. There's sort of medium field tournaments. Then there's some several thousand people. Get up to kind of like 5,000 people. That's kind of like the SPY, right? That's like around like 5,000 people. And that's, I would say that's sort of the top end of like medium size. But then you go up to the really, really high end tournaments, and yeah, it's a little different, and we're not there. We still are. These still are pretty small, even compared to something like if you played the smaller of the two SPYs on DraftKings, that's usually around like 2,200 people. So we're still in the smaller range. You don't have to get every single thing right.
Absolutely. So as piggybacking on that, and kind of as sort of to wrap the whole conversation, what are you doing with the drafts? Like, let's talk maybe some players or some, how you're constructing your team, some strategies. We'll definitely be talking about the schedule plenty. I think there's some fun things we might be able to do with the schedule. Very, very minor. Like most of these things are very, very minor, but I think with how much more difficult in BBM specifically it is to get through, I think there'll be some little levers we can pull. Right?
Are you talking about guys who get the crossover
matchups? Yeah.
I think that's the type of stuff, to be honest, that I don't find particularly compelling to do because it's like it just feels a little homeworky. I've got to memorize. Oh, this guy goes with this guy because he gets a little boost. We're giving him a little boost. But like, is it sharp? Yeah, it's sharp. Like, we should do that. I just don't. Maybe this is where Spike Week comes in and helps us out, helps us account for that a bit. But yeah, I think that type of stuff is where we're headed. I don't think we're like. The nice thing about best ball, though, is that I think something like stacking without the quarterback is still going to be an edge, like a pretty big edge this year. Because there's something like really psychologically satisfying about getting that stack and completing that stack. And I don't think people, and then they're like, they check that box. I stacked this guy, I stacked this guy, I'm done. I can do whatever I want now. And I think if you're thinking, I'm getting 3, I'm going to go 3, and I'm cool doing little mini correlations, because that's the other thing, right? If you're throughout your draft, if you're going breaking ties, keep in mind, we're not reaching all over the place. We're not blowing up our draft to do all this, right? But you're just going, I gotta, once the schedule comes out, right? We have to know. But it's like, I got a Charger, I'm getting a Chief. Let's say they play. I'm gonna break this tie to Rashee Rice here because I already had Quentin Johnson, or earlier in the draft, you're doing little minis like that. Those little minis can be built out. So it's I got sniped on this original stack that I want to do. The Tua double that I had is gone, but I do have this little Marquise Brown. I took him because I had Cup, and they play it's a Cardinals Rams week 17. So I got Marquise Brown with Cooper Kupp. I'm just going to prioritize Stafford a little bit more than I would have, and then I'm going to build out Van Jefferson, Tyler Higbee, and now I've got a full blown game stack. And so if you just sort of set yourself up, and you don't have to, the nice thing about doing that, right, is you don't have to tack on Trey McBride or something to make yourself feel like you got to bring back. You're just going, I'm going to break this tie. I'm going to break this tie, get these little mini correlations. And then you're always, no one can push you off balance too much. You can always just bounce, you can snap back and get something else. And if at the end of the day, if you end up with like a couple extra little mini correlations that never got tacked on, cool. That can be good. It's one more little mini bet that you made that another game has some points in it. And, if it doesn't go off, but it probably doesn't hurt.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't hurt. And that's the big thing, I think, what you just outlined about the whole basically the whole correlation conversation is certainly we would never be guilty of, embellishing and taking a bit too far. And so it wouldn't be our fault that the week 17 thing got blown out of proportion.
Can we
everybody else's fault?
So the example of week 17 correlation going too far was Tyler Algier and Zach Ertz.
Correct.
Which was directionally accurate. Tyler Algier went off. Trey McBride went off. Like not had a good game. Both those guys had great games. So, I mean, if the thing held up by the correlation skeptics was, kind of proved the point a little bit.
we literally changed Ball Mania IV's entire structure because of Tyler Algier and Zach Ertz, and it was kind of right.
It was kind of right.
It's absolutely hilarious. Like everything that's happened in Toutland of best ball over the last 2 years is legitimately hilarious. We were talking in the Discord yesterday. I was talking to Josh Jenkins, who's around and ship chasing around in your Discord, all that kind of stuff. Great guy. And we were just shooting the shit, saying like, if you did the opposite of like what everyone has said for, like, I'm not talking about week 17 correlation and stuff, but like, so shout out to the ship chasers, right? Visca, Sky, some of these guys that were flag plants.
The highlight reels, maybe don't draft guys we have a highlight reel for. I'll say that. But I think I give some good advice, but the highlight reels are not working too well.
I feel like I'm very thoughtful about all this, but when you hone in on any specific player, right? Trey Lance for 2 years, 2 straight years of Trey Lance, Kyle Pitts, my big flag plant, which is, again, we pushed the bid a little too far, but Darrington Evans was not getting drafted for half of the entire draft cycle. By the end, this is my shining moment in my history or my career of fantasy sports. There were times people were sniping Darrington from me in like the 13th round of drafts. It's just absolutely absurd. But like all these guys, awful, bust, hurt, just horrible picks. Shout out Liam again. Shipped Best Ball Mania, millionaire, awesome. Obsessed with the Bills, right? Drafts a ton of Bills.
Is he?
Bills.
Is Bills fan?
In case anyone hadn't noticed, pretty big. I
just
Bills
argued
fan.
with him about Dalton Kincaid for 45 minutes.
But he touts the Bills, right? So he gets starts his YouTube and is getting into the best ball space and is touting the Bills, right? Which seems totally reasonable. Even he had the power to bring down the entire Bills team in week 17 of last year. People that drafted the Bills were not wrong, and their week 17 game got fucking canceled. It's like absolutely, it's everything possible that could have gone wrong about like the specific players has gone wrong. However, the one thing that hasn't is this like correlation element. But I think the fact that, it's what we all do, the bits and exaggeration, hyperbole, whatever. But it's what you said. These things are just tiebreakers. It is when you reach a tier, right? What tier-based drafting really is. You reach an area, like your Tyquan Thornton pick is always one of my favorite examples. You reach a tier of all these wide receivers, and you're like, they're like the same. They're all the same. So that, like, we move down the decision tree, right? We move down the totem pole and we say, okay, well, I got Mostert. None of these other guys correlate with any players on my team. Okay, I'll just take Tyquan. If the player that's available,
I didn't just have Mostert. I had Gesicki. I had Sony Michel, who was currently on the Dolphins when I selected him, and I basically did like I tried to hit a single at that, or maybe I tried to hit a double, but not a home run with 2 running back spots. And then I also had Ramondre Stevenson. Okay. And so I had built out this whole like Dolphins Patriots thing, but like, I had Jacoby Myers as well. So there was a whole thing going on, but and I partly say that because I didn't draft Tyquan Thornton on any of my other teams. So like for me, I probably needed like all of that to get me on. I clearly wasn't that into Thornton. That's what got me onto Thornton, is the fact that I was building out this game stack, and he was the late pick for me. I can't remember if he was my 18th round pick, but he was my, a very, very late pick. And, so at that point you should be making those types of tiebreakers, right?
Exactly. It never trumps, again, in the DFS world, but same thing for best ball, like the projection or the ranking, whichever you would like. If a player is so undervalued, right? When you reach a point and I say, this guy is my 40th ranked player and I'm at pick 65, he doesn't correlate, take him. Like that is more the ADP value, the value of that player far exceeds everyone else that's available at that time. There can be guys who correlate, right? There could be Zach Ertz or Tyler Algier available to you there. But if you have a player a tier or multiple tiers ahead that's available, you take him. The correlation doesn't matter because you're trying to score the most points and get the highest value player.
The correlation is a projections boost, and it's only going to do so much. It's not like it boosts guys 2x what you would have expected. You know,
it's tiny, it's small.
It's a tiebreaker boost, but you do want to stack those anytime you can, because then you end up with a team that is projected for a lot of points if certain things happen. So it's this happens now. Okay. You know, like you said, like Raheem Mostert, you know, ripping off the touchdowns. It's like, now that that's happened, we're way more into these Patriots wide receivers, and you've got 2 of them and a pass catching running back. Okay. That sounds pretty interesting. You know, that's the whole game.
Exactly. That is the entire game. So anyway, I did just want to hit a couple of, you know, player side or just like draft ADP, anything like that. Is there anything that has jumped out to you so far as like something that's kind of exploitable in ADP? I have a couple of thoughts. Nothing super crazy, but I do think the general idea, I totally agree with like wisdom of the crowd, right? The market is generally going to be smarter, directionally accurate over the entire player pool than we are. But I think at this point in the season, 2 things. One, ADP gets preloaded, right, by these sites, and it's not accurate. It's not efficient. And so it still gets anchored to by drafters, right? That's just how the human mind works. And
like auto drafters and stuff. Like a player can only fall so much, you know, because people psychologically anchor to it. And it's like, well, he's at the top of the queue. I don't want to scroll too far down. It doesn't feel good. You know, and also it's like, how much should you scroll down? Because if a guy is 24 picks past you in the queue, like, he might come back. And yeah, he shouldn't come back. Maybe you do just genuinely prefer him at the pick you're selecting, but you should probably make the bet that he comes back so you can build one of these super teams, you know? So it's a tough thing to even say what you should do. And then therefore guys slowly make their way down and slowly make their way up, and under the normal course of things outside of injuries and major news and that type of stuff. But then there's also auto drafters, which is going to snap up any values.
So I'll say 2 scenarios where that I probably like a struggle with the most so far. So you get outside of like the really elite wide receivers, let's call it through like Amon-Ra, maybe DK Metcalf, something like that, right? Call it like the 2-3 turn ish is where kind of there's just a ginormous tier break at wide receiver for me.
Yeah.
But you also have kind of mixed in between there these running backs that I think are undervalued. Tony Pollard. I know I can't believe I'm tying my brand to Nick Chubb, but I like Nick Chubb.
I like Nick Chubb some this year, man. And I think if guys like us like Nick Chubb, he's probably undervalued.
Yeah, exactly. Because dude, you have no idea how much it takes for me to like Nick Chubb, and so especially on
I think like exactly at ADP, which probably means he's an absolute smash.
Yeah, exactly. You know, every other year would be me just being, oh look, Bijan. You know, Bijan. I want Bijan. But of course, who doesn't like Bijan? But when Nick Chubb, of course, Tony Pollard, I understand like, oh, maybe they'll bring back Zeke, but like I don't actually really care. He was great with Zeke there, and now they clearly don't prioritize Zeke, et cetera, et cetera. But point being, that whole range is like amazing. All the running backs there look good. Ramondre, even Jacobs. I can see the case for Jacobs. I'm a little lower on him than the rest. But there's this whole...
I feel the exact same way. But I'm trying to figure out... see the case.
Yeah. So I'm trying to figure out, you know, how to manipulate that. Because on one hand, I could see like everybody moving up. Like if you told me Garrett Wilson was at the 1-2 turn later, I'd be like, cool. If you told me Tony Pollard was, I'd be like, okay, I get it. But they're all kind of lumped together because I think everybody just has their own flavor that they like right there. Are you kind of feeling the same thing? And then like, how are you handling, you know, drafting around, you know, second, third-ish round?
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be one of the defining features of this part of draft season, is that there was this group of running backs available at the 2-3 turn that generally have profiles that you find more on the 1-2 turn. You know, and they're not guys that I always like taking at the 1-2 turn. I'm not saying they're sort of 1-2 turn values necessarily, but it's different. It's different than it usually is. And so given that it's different, and given that casual drafters tend to be more running back heavy, and given that there are the least amount of casual drafters that are going to be drafting all year right now, you know, and it'll be sort of steadily increasing, and then there'll be big surge in August, late August and early September, then I just don't really see these running back ADPs holding like this, you know? And I think it's like, well, who's going to get pushed down? Can like, you know, Amon-Ra St. Brown like really get pushed? Yeah. When the RB thirsty drafters come in, I think they're going to push down those like non-elite guys who were we're thinking, are going to break out and be these future stars. Even like a Garrett Wilson, I think, can get pushed down a little bit.
And when you say, sorry, I was just going to add to that. So like there's some wide receiver 2s that go in that spot. And I mean, I love them. Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins all go in. And I don't have a negative thing to say about them. But from a market perspective, like you said, when the August people come in, they're like, I'm going to draft the Eagles' second wide receiver over this, this RB1. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Right. Those are traditionally priced as third round picks, that kind of archetype, right? Like the second wide receiver on his own team, but it's a really good offense. We're really excited. Like an early third would be generally, which is not that different than where T. Higgins is going, but you're getting more, Waddle is like mid to late second. I think that the running backs are going to kind of start to slide up. Some of the running backs I actually think are like, more, they're like Ramondre. Like, why is Ramondre is like a mid-second type of archetype to me, and he's going in like the later third. I think that is not going. Remember when Alvin Kamara fell to like the late third because of suspension risk?
Yep.
Ramondre's like not that different of a profile than Kamara was last year. In fact, I think maybe he has a better profile just because he's younger and he had shown no signs of slowing down. He's not as talented as Kamara was at his peak, but there's no like, does this guy still have it risk? Plus zero suspension risk, obviously. Potential workhorse in a way that Kamara had, like, was it sort of at the tail end of, his fantasy stardom. But, I don't really get the Ramondre price. And so, I think you have to be thinking about ways to add some of these running back values. And I'm still going zero running back in some drafts. I'm still taking just one early running back, but I'm doing 2 running back starts as well. I'm going wide receiver, running back a fair amount. I was doing that a ton in the pre-draft, in the big board. I was going wide receiver, running back a lot. Yeah.
Anchor wide receiver with 2. I mean, they're superstars at that 2-3 turn running back.
Yeah. Yeah. So then though, you are behind the 8 ball in these rooms, because these rooms are snapping up the wide receivers. So I think you need to think hard if you're going to do, if you go wide receiver, running back, elite tight end, elite quarterback, I think you're done. Log out of the app. Like that's like, unless you can find, so obviously I'm being hyperbolic, but unless you can find like some crazy good values at wide receiver, I mean, you are in such rough shape at that point with one wide receiver through 5 rounds potentially. If you literally just went running back, tight end, quarterback after your round 1 wide receiver. The rooms are not letting you recover at wide receiver. The wide receivers in round 5 are not, like the round 5-6 turn is tough right now.
It's horrible. I don't like anybody.
It's horrible.
Any position, pick a position. I don't like them.
It's really rough. So I'm like, if that's where you need a wide receiver, if that's like your wide receiver 2 or 3 and you like need that guy, I don't love it. So I'm definitely, at the same time, I think it would be a mistake not to target some of these running backs in the second and the third round, because it's like, why are we drafting right now? What's the advantage of drafting right now? I think one of the advantages is taking some of these running back values. And Mike Leone in his Best Ball Manifesto, he actually showed that zero running back was not stronger early in the season. It was stronger later. And that to me got my wheels turning on these dead roster spots. And I think the dead roster spot element, if you're drafting a bunch of running backs in May, you're likely to create dead roster spots.
Mm-hmm.
If you're drafting a bunch of running backs in September, you're much less likely, because we at least know who all the backups are. We at least know who won the training camp battles, who got hurt, who didn't get hurt. So you've got a potential to bink more in May when drafting later running backs. But if you're attacking it with volume because you did a true zero running back team, your dead roster spots are probably going to be more than just a couple. And that really hurts your chances of advancing through the playoff weeks and in the finals. Again, we're trying to finish first here. Having those dead roster spots is really going to hurt your chances of finishing at the very top. So with that in mind, then maybe these second and third round running backs are kind of one of the key reasons to draft right now, because you can get 1 or 2 of those guys. And I I'm not saying don't draft McCaffrey and Bijan and everything, but
yeah,
but that being kind of overweight that group, I think right now makes sense. And you got to play it very carefully afterwards. You can't take a third guy. You can't, oh, this guy felt what a value. I got to get this guy in the 4th round too. I'm not doing that. I'm not saying you can't do it. You probably can do it. Build a true hyper fragile, but I don't like it because wide receivers are getting snapped up, and I already think you're kind of behind the 8 ball in these rooms, even when you do 2. And you can recover when you do 2 early running backs, but it's just much harder to recover, and you're boxed out of any kind of early-ish tight end, early-ish quarterback, I think, once you go 3 early running backs, just because of the way the wide receivers are getting snapped up. So that's kind of what I've been thinking about. But, if you get 1 or 2, let's say you go 2 of those early running backs, now you're talking maybe more about a 5 running back build. You can maybe get maybe your next running backs in round 9 or 10. Maybe you get another running back in round 12. Well, those are probably pretty high probability bets relatively. They're not like total scratch off lotto tickets. Maybe you take another guy in the 15th who's like a rookie. It's like maybe he doesn't give me much, but I think he's got a good chance to be contributing down the stretch. He won't be a dead roster spot for me, hopefully, in the fantasy playoffs, which is what we're talking about, these dead roster spots really mattering. And now you've got a running back room that's got a really good chance of surviving the chaos of the season, much better than even the 0 running back team in total. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. So exactly what you outlined was what I was going to say in terms of if I had to dream an optimal way to build out my team right now, let's use underdog, because I think it's a little more fitting on underdog. There's a lot of nuances to like DraftKings, especially with full PPR and bonuses and all that kind of stuff, and 20 roster spots that are a little bit unique. But generally this applies. But I think if I were to say, how do you best navigate right now in terms of let's try to capture that ADP value and create these upside teams while, as you said, keeping my first place equity as high as possible, taking into account the dead roster spots and all of that, it would be like what I would call an anchor wide receiver, right? So it doesn't really, let's say Chase. I get the 102. I take Jamar Chase. I come back to the 2-3 turn. I'm not saying these guys are always available there because they're not, but the dream would be, let me double tap a Pollard, Chubb at the 2-3 turn, something like that, to go with my superstar wide receiver. And then, like you said, now there's no running backs for a while. If you really want to dip your toes into quarterback or tight end or something like that, I think it's fine. But as you said, you got to be really careful. And then I'm going to try to hit this mid-tier of wide receivers where I think it's kind of gross actually, but I'm going to, wade my toe. I don't hate like the Bucks guys. JSN goes there. Those kinds of things. I don't actually love a lot of those guys, but I would wade my way through my favorite mid-round wide receivers to build.
Guys you like. Everyone's got their different guys there. Yeah. You're going to need to be right, but like you can get through it.
But you can tell yourself a story of all those guys, right? It's pretty easy. So then, exactly what you said, I'm going to come. There's the 0 running back range, right? Call it from, it's probably ADP wise, like maybe a Cam Akers, something like that. The 7th through the 12th. I think
it starts even a little earlier. Then you can go. Well, if you go 2, then I wouldn't be going
Dalvin,
Miles Sanders, Dameon Pierce, Rashad White, like those guys. I think if I go Pollard, Chubb, I'm not really that interested in that group. I'm skipping that group. But if I go just Pollard or just Chubb, then I don't mind tacking on a Miles Sanders, in the late 6th or whatever as my RB2. So yeah, I just play it a little different depending on how many I took early.
Yeah. And so then I would live in that range for, let's say, my next 2, exactly like what you said. So I really like Damian Harris, but again, whoever you prefer. Yeah. Harris, the Bills, Cook, Charbonnet, right? Whatever. There's a million Mixon. There's a million guys in that range that I think all have a case to be made. I maybe dip my toes in twice, right? From the 6th to the 12th round. And those are guys who you
can hit home runs with.
You can hit a home run with all. So now you have 4 running backs that can hit absolute home runs. And there's 0, other than, of course, injury, there's 0 risk of dead roster spots, right? Like, I mean, Damian Harris is not getting cut. Like, Rashad White is not getting cut. Well, are they going to work out? Who the hell knows?
Who knows?
It's May, but they're not going to be dead. And then, like you said, then you can be smart about how you take that last guy. I think I would keep it to 5. And I would say, rookie, right? Kendre, Izzy. I really like Chuba. I don't really know why Chuba goes 200th overall.
Love Chuba Hubbard.
It doesn't make any sense.
Pete's on him. You're on him. I'm on him. I don't think this is going to last. Get your Chuba Hubbard. He's a clear-cut handcuff. I mean, don't take him as a literal handcuff to Miles Sanders, but he's like, we talked about the backfields being clear as mud, and his name popped in my head then. I don't want to derail us on some Chuba Hubbard love in the very beginning of the podcast.
But we are off the rails if it's a Chuba Hubbard segment of the first show.
Somehow I contained myself and we saved it for the end of the show. But Chuba Hubbard gives you, I think, is one of the few guys who has like a very clear backup running back spot. And he looked good last year. Like, he flashed in a lot of efficiency numbers, similar to D'Onta Foreman. I mean, he was not getting blown out of the water by D'Onta Foreman efficiency wise. I think he could have a standalone role to some extent. And then at the end of the season, I mean, if it happens to be that Miles Sanders isn't playing, Chuba Hubbard could be a smash. I mean, he like a high-end RB2 type of guy. So I'm a big fan. Jaylen Warren is another guy. Clear handcuff, right? Happens to be maybe more talented than the guy ahead of him. Is it too early to admit that Najee Harris might be worse than Jaylen Warren, or do we have to wait till next year?
Both those situations, right? Well, I drafted a ton of Miles Sanders last year. Guess what? He was on the Eagles. It wasn't because I'm a Miles Sanders stan. He's not some legendary running back. He's just a dude, but he was on the Eagles, right? That's why we'll do the whole, I'm sure we'll talk plenty about Penny, Swift, all these idiots over the course of the summer. But same thing, like, what Miles Sanders versus Chuba Hubbard in terms of being an NFL running back, is there really that much of a difference? Not really to me. And this team has shown the propensity to play multiple running backs. Same thing with the Steelers. I'm not saying they've shown the propensity like the Panthers have to play multiple, but last year they did. And it was because Jaylen Warren outplayed Najee Harris, right? And so like, these guys probably have standalone value. Chuba definitely does, in my opinion. These guys have standalone value, and the upside is crazy. So really quickly before we wrap, though, I was just gonna play devil's advocate to the Ramondre thing, because I do like Ramondre. I think I have him ranked a little bit higher than his ADP. My counterpoint to Ramondre is nothing about Ramondre, and so that's why I think he deserves to go where he goes. He clearly can be a workhorse. He catches passes, efficient runner, good player, blah blah blah. Did it last year. We know we can do it. No issues. The problem I have is that he did it when Damian Harris went out. And so now, of course, Damian Harris is gone. The Patriots did bring in J-Rob, and no, they did not draft anybody this year, but last year they drafted two guys, Pierre Strong and
both might be talented.
And who knows? This could mean nothing. They could just be like, oh no, Ramondre's better than these guys. And I do think he probably is. But the Patriots have typically been historically not like, we're just going to hand over the reins to one dude, right? We had the LeGarrette Blount and Dion Lewis and all this different, James White, obviously. And teams change, things change, but it's still Belichick. It's still all that. So I think that the median outcome for Ramondre is probably, or there's a lot more likelihood that Ramondre is not quite what we think he is than the market will say. But the bull case is like, he's way undervalued in the bull case. So I understand why he goes where he goes, but I do think there's a little bit of reason for skepticism in however you're evaluating his range.
And I think that's good pushback, and one reason to go, hey, look, there's a group of running backs who doesn't typically go here, but also generally I think running backs tend to be a little overdrafted historically.
Yes.
So the fact that they're now going a little later does not mean that we need to fall all over ourselves to draft running backs early because they're a little later than normal. I mean, I think this is a little bit of a rational, to me, it's a bit rational by the market. I know, some people are thinking this is crazy. Wide receivers are going too high. I think this is more efficient, to be honest, because it's harder to break away from. When you had the old running back, prices, guys like us could just completely sit out of that and we could just still be fine because we can get running back values late. Zero running back is what I'm talking about, or hero running back. And it's just like, it was easier. In fact, you almost had to like tell yourself, okay, it's time for me to stop taking wide receivers. Cause the issue is more that it's like, oh, but there's a wide receiver in round 10 that I like and round 11 that I like, but it was easy to break away from. At the same time, the people that were taking early running back, they were doing okay sometimes because, you get your early running backs, there's wide receivers available to you later, you couldn't take too much at running back. I think this is why Hyperfragile had such a successful run a couple years ago, is that you limit the amount of total draft capital that you spend at running back, even though you took early running backs, but then you're able to tack on the wide receivers and you can find those wide receivers later. I think the current ADP makes that harder to find those, not impossible, but harder to find those wide receivers.
Definitely.
Later, it makes it harder to break away from the current ADP and just say, you know what, I'm going to beat you by drafting a bunch of running backs. I don't think you can. I don't think you can win that way, really. And in fact, the wide receiver teams, they're gonna be super strong at running back too, because everyone going wide receiver heavy is pushing running backs down the board. So as long as you don't go hyper ideological with it and say, I'm not going to take a running back till round 11 or something, which I wouldn't suggest. You want to maybe start taking your running backs even in 0 running back builds, round 6, round 7, something like that, and start building in those running back points. But you're doing it with starting running backs, Dameon Pierce, Miles Sanders, Rashad White, Isaiah Pacheco. Like, you're doing it with starting NFL running backs. Some of them on good offenses. So anyway, it's like the fact that it's harder to not do what the field is doing, to me, makes the case that this is actually more efficient. If I can just completely ignore the market, then maybe the ADP is not that efficient. And I don't think you can ignore the market here on wide receiver. I think to some extent you've got to follow suit a little bit. And with that in mind, if you skip Ramondre, if you skip Pollard, skip Chubb, all these guys, you're probably fine. I don't think they're must drafts in any draft. They're just, I just think this is an interesting part of the current ADP landscape.
Definitely. And I think you can counter to everything that I said and we said about that little 2-3 turn. Like you said, if you want to forego that, load up those wide receivers or Kelsey or whatever. And we just talked about from the 6th to the 12th round, you just want to hit all your running backs right there. Like, you're also not going to have dead roster spots then. Like, of course, you don't have the Pollard could be the RB1 or something like that. You don't necessarily have that. You have a really good, like you said, you have 6 starting running backs, like on good teams. Yeah. So like you're not hurting. But we do got to get out of here. Really quickly, which I did not mention at the top. If you missed the beginning, I don't know what you were doing. We have a partnership between Spike Week and Legendary Upside, where Legendary Upside subscribers will get 40% off of their Spike Week subscription. All you got to do is, when you go to sign up, there's a little button that says, I have a coupon. You use the coupon. You say, I put in leg up into that coupon code. And as long as you're subscribed to Legendary Upside, you will get 40% off of your Spike Week. So, but make sure, if you're subscribed to Pat and you want to really dive into the best ball space, we got you covered with a nice 40% discount over here at Spike Week. Anything else, Pat, before we get out of here? And then get ready for next week and a fun weekend of drafting.
No, this has been a lot of fun. I'm excited about the show going forward. I'm excited for, this collaboration overall. I'm excited for people to be able to check out the Spike Week tools. I think they've been super helpful in just kind of me, like, understanding what my exposures are on DraftKings, which, if you only use it for that, I feel like it's already massive. Yeah. But, trying to figure out things like player combinations and stuff is really cool as well. Trying to figure out what structures you're using, you're like, realizing maybe you're doing like a ton of elite tight end or a ton of elite quarterback, and you don't want to do, you want to mix in some more 3 quarterback builds, whatever. I think just analyzing your own play is such an important part of this. And you guys make that like possible on some sites and much easier on something like Underdog. So just excited to be doing this going forward. And legendaryupside.com/early. On top of all the other promos, including a $50 Underdog credit right now, I'm offering $30 off your first year. So, what a time to be alive.
Yeah, what a time to be getting into best ball. We're all just we're all so excited. We're just giving away all the goods for much cheaper. I will make sure, if you're watching this on YouTube, get in the description. I'll make sure to add all this information in there for you. Links to everything from Pat, links to everything from Spike Week, all the fun discounts and everything. But for myself and for Pat, I know he's got to run. For all the dogs that are sleeping, thank God this is a good time to record.
Unbelievable.
This.
The dog slept through it.
The whole show. I can't remember the last time I recorded and there wasn't chaos from dogs. But we'll be back next Thursday. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. Jesus.